Das sollten wir uns nicht angucken, Digga. Das Video geht 30 Minuten, ich bin 1 Minute drin und ich bin schon so gottlos sauer, wirklich. Was geht ab, YouTube? Wir schauen jetzt Israeli Pride is insane, this propaganda doesn't work anymore. Ich habe heute schon einen TikTok dazu gesehen, dass es wohl in Israel momentan Pride ist und dass sie diese ganzen Aufnahmen davon benutzen, um fett Propaganda zu machen für ihren Apartheidsstaat. Und in dem gleichgeschlechtliche Paare nicht mal heiraten dürfen. Also keine Ahnung, warum man dann da fett eine Pride macht oder so. I guess, das Bild von Israel weltweit oder im Westen ist dann besser, wenn man ein bisschen Pride Parade macht, während man gleichzeitig Libanesen wegbombt. Aber hey, egal. Wir gehen da jetzt rein, wie Gay People und die LGBTQ-Community instrumentalisiert werden vom Apartheidsstaat Israel, um im Westen ein besseres Bild abzugeben und seine Kriegsverbrechen irgendwie zu rechtfertigen oder unter den Teppich kehren zu können. Mal schauen. Wir sind gespannt und wir lassen ein Like da und schreiben einen Kommentar, wenn euch das Video gefällt. Mit wir meine ich euch. Und let's go, wir gehen rein.
Hey yo!
We want to introduce you to the most amazing destinations in the world.
Tel Aviv and Jerusalem.
Ach so.
Nations in the world.
Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. It's young,
Sunny,
colorful,
diverse. It's balagan, messy, and above all,
it's incredibly tasty.
Digga. Except if you're Palestinian. Krass. Digga, das hat mir jetzt schon zu viel gegeben, so.
Nearly 4 years ago,
Digga, das ist so gottlose Scheiße, ne? Holy shit.
in 2022, I made a video about why new atheists love Israel, and part of that was focusing on Israel pinkwashing its apartheid and holding these massive pride festivals. And Israel
Pride rises at the lowest place on Earth. This June, the Dead Sea becomes Pride Land, the biggest LGBTQ plus Festival. Das Plus steht aber nicht für Palästinenser, müsst ihr wissen. Festival ever in the Middle East. 4 days of non-stop celebration, community and connection. Israel celebrates its LGBTQ plus community bigger than ever.
seemingly
Cool.
double
Was ist mit der LGBTQ plus Community in Palästina? Was habt ihr mit denen angestellt? Kurze Frage. Frage für eine Freundin.
and tripled down on this, where they're set to expand.
Ach, die habt ihr in die Luft gejagt. Das ist aber nicht so Pride, oder? Genozid ist nicht so Pride, oder? Ist Genozid Pride? Ist Genozid Slay? Ist Genozid Vogue? Wir wissen es nicht.
And this even
Digga, das geht mir so auf den Sack jetzt schon. Holy shit.
further with this new
Das sollten wir uns nicht angucken, Digga. Das Video geht 30 Minuten, ich bin 1 Minute drin und ich bin schon so gottlos sauer, wirklich. Wie können die es wagen, Digga? Das ist auch dieser Grund dann, warum alle Leute, ja, aber wenn du schwul bist in Palästina, wirst du vom Dach geworfen. Ja, Bruder, halt dein Maul. Erstens, selbst wenn das so wäre, hätten schwule Menschen in Palästina nichts zu befürchten, weil es keine Dächer dort mehr gibt durch Israel, Bruder. Zweitens, du kannst wirklich sehr, sehr schlecht dich selbst realisieren als schwule Person, wenn du halt einen Kopfschuss von Israel im Kindesalter bekommst, weißt du? Natürlich kannst du dann nicht so gut dir deinen Slay Gay Pride feiern, wenn du halt von Amerika genozidiert wirst, ne? Komisch aber auch. Gummo, was bin ich sehen? Digga, du bist in dem schlimmsten Video der ganzen Menschheit drin, glaube ich. Nein, Quatsch, aber, also, like, das ist jetzt schon oh Gott. Erster Tag ohne Gras und ich gucke mir so ein Video an. Das wird nicht gut enden. Ich sag euch so, wie es ist. Ich habe auch nur noch einen Filter, Digga, wirklich. Ich hoffe, ich finde gleich noch eine angefangene Packung Filter, wo noch welche drin sind. Weil, ich glaube, keine Ahnung, egal. Aber, ja. Ich gehe mal kochen, auch am Herd. Ja, Mann. Viel Erfolg.
pride event they
Ey, Lobby und Trollen, schön, dass ihr da seid.
are hosting this year. And I wanted to use that to talk about just generally Israel pinkwashing its apartheid and genocide, and how even now there are still liberals in the West falling for it. When I made that video back in 2022, I would say that there would be far more people in the West who'd be very like accepting of that propaganda. Like they'd actually buy into the narrative that Israel is some beacon of secular tolerant values in a backwards Middle East. That's how new atheists often framed it. I think today this is ringing even more hollow, but I still wanted to talk about it and also talk about how Israel generally isn't a very tolerant society of LGBT people, and it's actually getting far worse. So when you see people in the ruins of Gaza, like IDF soldiers waving a rainbow flag, I've made videos talking about how this is woke fascism, essentially justifying mass killing and ethno-nationalism using the language of progressivism. But even for this guy in the photo, I'll post it for you now, they're
In the name of love, Digga. In the name of love. Ey.
fighting for a government that doesn't like them. They're fighting for a government that is anti-gay and anti-LGBT. And when you listen to some gay IDF soldiers talk about it,
Du kannst halt nicht heiraten, Digga, als schwule Person dort. Kannst du nicht. Du kannst nicht du kannst, like, es gibt keine gleichgeschlechtliche Ehe, Digga. Du darfst nicht außerhalb du darfst auch nicht, like, Digga, was für Pride?
they think they're making themselves safer by destroying Palestine because they think that's the biggest threat to them as LGBT people, not realizing that they're actually making themselves far less safe by emboldening this far-right government and likely will be rolling back their rights as well and not improving their
Digga,
rights.
ich habe einfach nur noch einen Filter, Digga. Oh nö, oh nö. Eigentlich müsste ich irgendwo noch eine Filterpackung haben, ich schwör auf alles. Als ob ich nur noch einen Filter habe, das kann ich. Oh no. Okay, Leben am Limit, Alter.
Way. But I did want to talk about that in regards to how still some people think that it's hypocritical to be pro-LGBT
Voller Krise.
and pro-Palestine. That's what they always use against general people on the left. Like those things are incompatible. So all of that coming up for you today. If you like the video,
Ja, wirklich, Digga, ohne Scheiß voll crazy. Ich habe heute gedacht, ich mache den Stream nicht an, weil ich habe keinen Bock, ich hatte keine Motivation so. Und dann war ich so, okay, scheiße. Aber irgendwie habe ich auch nichts zu tun und ich habe auch kaum noch Tabak. So, vielleicht gehe ich einfach live und bete nach Tabak, so, weißt du, bete nach Geld für Tabak. Und jetzt ist mein Tabak zwar fast leer, aber da ist halt noch genug für ein paar Kippen drin, aber ich habe halt nur noch einen Filter, weißt du. Das heißt, mein Problem war gar nicht der Tabak, sondern die Filter. Oder beziehungsweise beides. Beziehungsweise mein fehlendes Geld ist mein Problem. Yeah.
If you watched it, please leave a like, maybe subscribe to the channel. If you want to support my work.
Ohne Scheiß, ich kenne den Channel auch noch gar nicht. Ich lasse euch auch mal einen Link zum Video da, weil das scheint echt nicht so schlecht zu sein bis jetzt.
Check out my YouTube memberships and check out my Patreon page. And if you want to follow me on social media, at The Tabernacle on Instagram and also on Blue Sky. So let's get straight into the news story that inspired this video. So Israel set to host Middle East's largest Pride festival. Israel will host the Middle East's largest ever LGBTQ festival in the summer, with organizers planning to build a Pride city at the Dead Sea. The new Pride Land Festival will transform a section of the Judean desert into a party destination with 15 hotels and beach complexes, plus parties and performances running around the clock. Aaron Cohen, the main producer and initiator of the festival, said Pride Land will be the biggest undertaking for Israel's LGBT
Boah, Alter, macht mich das wütend, Mann!
community, much larger than the annual parade held in Tel Aviv. To take an investment of millions, purchase entire hotels for 4 days, and build a city from scratch in the middle of the desert, Cohen told the J Post.
Ja, damit kennen die sich ja aus, ne?
It's an experience that
So, Siedlungen bauen. Vielleicht, ey, wann können wir eigentlich nächstes Pride Festival im Westjordanland haben, bitte? Können wir bitte das nächste Pride Festival so im Westjordanland haben und dann am besten in so einem Haus, wo vorher noch Palästinenser drin gewohnt haben und dann da einfach ein paar Regenbogenflaggen aufstellen und dann haben wir den Vibe, checkt ihr? So,
lives 24/7 from quiet visits to nights of pride with a living envelope of music and people. While the parties
Bruder!
are the biggest draw for the festival, Cohen said there will also be a dedicated space for families and children to enjoy scenic views along with cultural events and workshops.
Wenn ich in Israel an Scenic Views denke, dann denke ich immer an diese Genozid-Touristen, die da an der Grenze gechillt haben und sich angeschaut haben, wie Israel Bomben wirft auf Palästina und das abgefeiert haben. Da muss ich dann immer kurz daran denken, wenn ich an Israels Scenic Views denke, weißt du? Like, weil ich so viele Videos davon gesehen habe, wie irgendwelche Israelis sich angeschaut haben, wie palästinensische Gebäude und Palästina generell hochgejagt wurde und die sich einfach darüber gefreut haben und das ist sowas, also wie kannst du, ey, Digga,
goal of the festival is to create a multi-generational
ich schwöre, Digga, wirklich, jeder, der da hingeht, Bruder, jeder, der, also wirklich, wie kannst du, Bruder, wenn du da hingehst nach Israel, um Pride zu feiern, dann ist dir wirklich überhaupt gar nicht mehr zu helfen, Digga. Dann kannst du auch, okay, Distanz, Herr Dobrindt, like, ich halte mich bedeckt. Ich habe keinen Bock, morgen gebannt zu sein, aber ey, ich halte mich bedeckt und Free Palestine, Bruder, wirklich,
Pride city to unite locals and tourists. The festival is also set to highlight the Dead Sea as a key getaway for LGBTQ visitors. The promotion of the festival comes at a rough time for tourism in Israel, which has suffered due to its ongoing conflict with Iran and Hezbollah. The US State Department.
ja, ne, a rough time for tourism in Israel. Crazy. Warum haben denn nicht so viele Leute Bock, nach Israel zu reisen? Hat das vielleicht was mit dem live gestreamten Genozid der letzten Jahre zu tun? Mit den weiteren völkerrechtswidrigen Angriffskriegen und den weiteren völkerrechtswidrigen Besiedlungen im Südlibanon und so weiter und so fort? Oder meint ihr, das hat einfach was... Digga, ey. Oder wirklich... Ja, natürlich ist der Tourism am Arsch, Digga. Wenn live gestreamt, Digga, ey. Okay, ich bin ruhig. Ich bin ruhig, Digga. Ich habe kein Gras mehr und ich bin ruhig. So, ich bin ruhig.
Continues to advise that Americans avoid traveling to Israel. So like I talked about in my videos of like woke fascism and stuff, it just seems like absolutely bizarre, like the contrast of trying to host an event that is so progressive in just the heart of like one of the worst countries in the world, in the heart of an apartheid state currently, not just having done a genocide to Gaza, but also doing one to southern Lebanon and also starting a war with Iran right now. In the midst of all of that, you have all these LGBT groups that are generally pro-Zionist as well. You're not going to find many LGBT Israeli groups that are against what Israel are doing generally, even if they might not like Netanyahu for being conservative. And in the midst of that, they're dedicated to pinkwashing what's going on. Even the official Israel Twitter account posted this about it. Pride rises at the lowest place.
Even the official Israel Twitter Account, Bruder. Ey. Digga, ja, alles gut. Wir beruhigen uns, okay?
On Earth. This June, the Dead Sea becomes Pride Land, the biggest LGBTQ plus festival ever in the Middle East. 4 days of non-stop celebration, community and connection. Israel celebrates its LGBTQ plus community
Na,
bigger
Leute?
than ever. So make no mistake.
Habt ihr euch schon eure Tickets gehört für Pride in Israel, Digga? Seid ihr hyped? So, ich sehe mich da auch. Ich werde dann hier chillen und richtig darauf abgehen, wie schwul ich bin, Digga. Ich werde richtig gay rumtanzen, checkt ihr? Ich würde mich richtig freuen, dass ich schwul bin. So richtig, ja, Mann. Ich bin so gay, Digga. Fick auf Palästinenser, ja.
Pride Land is
Ich bin so schwul und weiß, yippie.
doing propaganda for the Israeli
Boah, geil.
state, and I'm just kind of sickened by all the people who will go to Israel for this Pride event. But I also think that highlights a key problem with often Western attitudes towards LGBT rights. And you see that in the West a lot. For example, our health secretary right now in the UK is a gay man called Wes Streeting, but he's also a gay man who has rolled back trans rights in a way that basically no government.
Interessant. Was ein... Warte, wie heißt der? Wie heißt der?
Has-
Ich muss aufpassen. Wedge Streeting. Okay. Wedge Streeting, du mutmaßlicher Piepton, Alter. Fick dich. Fick dich und fick deine gesamte Scheiße da. Fick dich. Fick deine... Ja, was ein Bastard, ganz einfach. So, jetzt habe ich es gesagt. Mutmaßlich ein Bastard, Digga. Ich glaube, seine Eltern waren nicht verheiratet, als sie den gezeugt haben. So ein Ding ist das.
Gay man who has rolled back trans rights in a way that basically no government has done since trans rights have been like enshrined into law and stuff like that.
Wie hart kann ich ihn jetzt beleidigen, ohne eine Anzeige zu kassieren? Was glaubt ihr? So. Wie hart. Scheiße, Digga. Oh Mann, ey.
Right? So it's a person who doesn't really see himself as part of the broader LGBT community, just basically destroying the rights of another group within the LGBT community.
Yeah, but he can't be transphobic because he's gay himself.
To further his own career. This guy wants to be prime minister, right? But he probably doesn't see himself as part of that. And you see that a lot. There have been various different right-wing organizations
Ja, chillig, Digga.
that claim to be pro-gay, but they're anti-trans as well. So that is the big split you're seeing.
Ja, geil, Alter.
With a lot of
Cool. Hurensöhne, alles. Sorry, ich wollte das Wort nicht mehr sagen. Hundesöhne, alles. Alles Hundesöhne. Mental Kintsugi, Etnirelia, kleiner Geheimtipp. Mexiko hat keinen Beleidigungsparagraphen, lol. Und damit einen guten mexikanischen Morgen. Digga, Kintsugi, wirklich, ne? Ich wünsche dir auch einen schönen mexikanischen Morgen oder einen deutschen Abend, ne? Aber das Ding ist, ich habe legit kein Geld auf meinem Konto, um mir Tabak zu kaufen, Digga. Ich habe hier meinen letzten Filter in der Hand. So, legit, mein letzter Filter gedreht in eine Kippe, so. Wenn ihr mich supporten wollt, aus Ruhezeichen Kofi, Digga, weil dann könnte ich mir heute Tabak kaufen, das fände ich sehr geil, aber like, sonst rauche ich halt, I guess, ohne Filter oder so, keine Ahnung. Egal, solange ich noch Tabak habe, aber egal, anderes Thema. Kintsugi, du weißt ganz genau, dass wir schon darüber geredet hatten, man kann nicht einfach so nach Mexiko auswandern, wenn du nicht jemanden da heiratest oder dir so ein fettes Visa kaufst für Leute, die so ein Digital Nomad Visa haben, ja, das kostet irgendwie 9.000 Euro oder so eine Scheiße, keine Ahnung, Digga. Du weißt ganz genau, dass ich nicht nach Mexiko kann, es sei denn, du heiratest mich, Bruder. Fick dich! So, ich würde ja gerne. Ich kann aber nicht. Ich habe auch kein Geld, Bro. Ich habe nicht mal Geld, um mir Filter zu kaufen. Wie soll ich nach scheiß Mexiko kommen, ja? Fick dich. Ich hasse dich, Mann. Ich gönne dir das so sehr, dass du in Mexiko chillst. Aber jetzt gerade fuckst du mich so ab. So, like, ja toll, dass Mexiko keinen Beleidigungsparagraphen hat, aber ich habe auch kein Geld für einen mexikanischen Ausweis. So, like, Mann.
Also, I think for a lot of them as well.
Das erste, was ich hier sehe, ist ein Tweet von Gays Against Groomers. Ja, willkommen, Below Average. Schön, dass du dabei bist, Digga.
They view the struggle for equality, and this is how they're different from just general leftists and leftist people in the LGBT community. They view the struggle for equality in a very Western individualist way, where their fight is for their own rights as gay people, lesbian people, trans people, and it's not about anything broader. So they don't actually see any problem with going to Israel to celebrate their identity and celebrate their pride in their identity. They don't see actually there's a contradiction there because they buy into this propaganda that is so prevalent that, well, you couldn't be gay in Gaza, you couldn't be gay in Egypt, you couldn't be gay in all these places, but you could be gay in Israel.
Ist das so, ja? Ist das so?
And your individual rights are all
Ist das so?
that matters.
Darfst du heiraten als Person, die schwul ist? Darfst du nicht?
And that's why they always talk about why it's so hypocritical that leftists are pro-LGBT and pro-Palestinian, but they don't think it's hypocritical to absolutely flatten somewhere like Gaza, where you're going to be killing loads of LGBT people. Just because they're in the closet doesn't mean they don't exist. They don't see the hypocrisy in that, but they
rede mal.
think the hypocrisy is if you stand with oppressed people, no matter where they are, they absolutely lack any nuance about things like economic development, general freedom.
In Palästina dürftest du gar nicht schwul sein, deswegen ist es auch vollkommen okay, dass wir die closeted gay people wegbomben im Namen der Selbstverteidigung. Ne? Gay Pride, jetzt, am Toten Meer.
Freedom of education.
Was ist das auch für eine unglaubliche Ironie, dass Gay Pride am lowest point of Earth im Toten Meer stattfindet. Oh, weißt du? Das ist also, der Witz schreibt sich selber. Like, dass in Israel eine Gay Pride am Toten Meer ist. Like, war das Meer palästinensisch oder warum ist das tot? So, frage ich mich.
In various different countries, and they don't appreciate how often the push for civil rights in countries that are dominated by Abrahamic religions who have a certain view on gender and have a certain view on gay rights, that pretty much goes hand in hand with economic development and general freedoms that are fought for by left-wing movements in countries that are not subjugated by the West. So what do I mean by that? For example, take Egypt for an example of a country that doesn't have a good record on LGBT rights. It's dominated by a military dictatorship, which is backed up by the West and supported by Israel. Protest movements and
Interessant.
freedom is generally crushed in that, and it's a very poor country.
Es ist soweit, der Steuermann braucht mich.
Yoshilein, was geht
Ich gehe
ab?
für dich in den Tod.
Große rote Sonne. Oh, Seven, danke dir nochmal damals für den Raid.
Und dann geht's los.
Kannst halt nicht bringen, Digga. Was geht? Schön, dass du da bist. Oder schön, dass ihr da seid. Danke für den Raid. Mach mal irgendwer einen Shoutout. Oder sind alle Mods gerade abwesend? Ich mach selber einen. Guck mal. Man muss auch noch mal selber was tun hier. Yoshilein. So, bam. Lasst ein Follow da, Alter. Ich danke für den Raid. Ich hoffe, ihr hattet einen wunderbaren Stream. Wir schauen gerade ein sehr wütend machendes Video, was uns auch genau richtig hittet, denn ich habe seit gestern kein Gras mehr, Digga. Und dementsprechend bin ich sowieso scheiße gelaunt, so. Und jetzt schauen wir ein Video. Israeli Pride is insane. This propaganda doesn't work anymore. Und es geht ja legit da, Digga. Warte, wir sind bei 806. Warte kurz. Ich will euch dieses eine Bild einmal kurz zeigen, was so quasi den Ton settet. In the name of love, Digga. Und wusstet ihr schon, dass es jetzt hier, es gibt jetzt hier in Israel, Digga. Wo ist denn das? Da. Dieses Jahr im Juni gibt es ein Pride-Event am Toten Meer, Digga. In Israel, wusstet ihr das? Habt ihr euch schon eure Tickets dafür gekauft eigentlich? So, wenn ihr Pride feiern wollt und richtig geil eure Gayness zelebrieren wollt, dann, ne? Ab geht's zum Toten Meer. Digga. Ey. Bruder, ey.
In that, and it's a very poor country. In that environment, you're going to have more religious conservatism, you're going to have more intolerance flourishing generally. And in Abrahamic religious dominated countries, you're probably never going to have the same equal rights if you don't allow these people to govern themselves. I say Abrahamic because if you go to Asia, Southeast Asia, you see more how they have a different cultural attitude to LGBT rights, and it stems from
Ja, Gay Rights sind literally überall, also Gay Rights sind überall viel, also weißt du, dort wo abrahamische Religionen sind, also das Christentum, das Judentum, der Islam, so, dort gibt es so, dort wo die Religion große Rolle spielt und die Religion auch was gegen Gay People hat, dann ist es offensichtlich nicht so sicher, sich zu outen und so, weißt du. Aber wenn du dir zum Beispiel andere Länder anguckst, in der ganzen Geschichte zum Beispiel, also ob du dir jetzt den gesamten globalen Süden anschaust vor der Kolonisierung durch den Westen, dort wirst du eigentlich feststellen, dass es teilweise sogar Kulturen gab, wo zum Beispiel nicht-binäre Menschen oder Transmenschen legit einfach irgendwie als Priester angehimmelt wurden oder so, Digga, weil die eine bessere Connection quasi so dadurch, dass sie eine bessere Connection zwischen den Geschlechtern haben sie irgendwie auch eine bessere Connection zur Geisterwelt oder irgendwie sowas, weißt du? Oder bei den, wie heißen die auf Deutsch, bei den Mughals, Alter, die Indien eingenommen haben, dort war das auch so, dass Transmenschen sehr oft hohe beratende Funktionen hatten, und halt so einfach ihr Leben gelebt haben. Und weil Transmenschen gibt's schon für immer, weißt du? Transmenschen gibt's länger, als das Christentum gibt, so, weißt du? Und überall immer auf der Welt gab's schon Transmenschen und schwule Menschen und so weiter. So. Nur wenn dann der weiße Mann überall hingekommen ist und den Barbaren Zivilisation gebracht hat und damit halt seine Klassengesellschaft und seine vom Patriarchat so gestützten Gender Roles enforced hat, so, dann ist es halt, deswegen gibt es halt in vielen Ländern heutzutage nicht mehr Gay-Rechte oder sind Gay-Menschen nicht mehr so krass angesehen oder so gut angesehen oder sind generell schlecht angesehen, einfach durch die Kolonialisierung des Westens, Alter, größtenteils. Also das ist wirklich crazy, wenn man sich da mal mit der Geschichte ein bisschen auseinandersetzt. Das ist wirklich krass. So, das ist, Großteil der Geschichte war es nie irgendwo ein Problem, wenn du trans warst, so. War einfach so. You know, war einfach so, Digga. So, naja. Aber gut. Egal, anderes Thema. Boah, fuck mich das Video ab, Digga. Puh, scheiß die Wand an. Okay.
their own religious beliefs, and it stems from not being dominated by Abrahamic religions. Even if you think of like poorer countries like Thailand or even places like Vietnam, where maybe legally LGBT rights aren't as good as Western countries, there is a general tolerance and acceptance.
Und vor allem, wir dürfen ja nicht vergessen, Digga, dass es in Deutschland, es ist ja jetzt nicht so, als wenn wir hier the Shrining Beacon of Civilization wären, Bruder. So Gay Marriage gibt es in Deutschland, soweit ich weiß, erst seit 2011. Bis in die 70er Jahre war es noch verboten, öffentlich schwul zu sein als Mann. Also komm mal bitte runter von eurem Western Supremacy Trip, Alter, dass es im Westen so krass ist für schwule Menschen und so. Digga, das Durchschnittsalter von Transfrauen ist, soweit ich weiß, in Deutschland 30. So, hat das was mit krassen Rechten zu tun für Transmenschen oder wo? Also wo sind diese krassen Rechte? Also weißt du, like, obgleich du Rechte hast, obgleich du Gesetze hast, die Rechte von Transmenschen oder von LGBTQ-Menschen schützen sollen, hast du ja trotzdem krasse Ausgrenzung in der Gesellschaft, weißt du? Hast du trotzdem enormen Druck, dass du dich diesen Geschlechterrollen anpasst und dem heteronormativen Weltbild anpasst, so, weißt du? Weswegen sich immer noch sehr viele, so, trotz dessen, dass es das Selbstbestimmungsgesetz gibt, bringen sich immer noch sehr viele Transmenschen um, weißt du? So, und, like, wir können nicht, ach, Digga, wirklich, egal. Ich will mich jetzt hier nicht darüber aufregen, so, ich reg mich jetzt über Israel auf, so, weiter geht's.
There that you might not find in similar poor countries that are dominated by Abrahamic religions. It just seems to be Abrahamic religions and the strain of them have been more historically anti-gay than you find in other places. I'm not saying like lots of these countries don't have problems with it, but I do think there is a more direct connection with Christianity, Judaism, and Islam and anti-LGBT policies than there are with general Eastern religions, even though we are seeing in places like India, there are continuing attacks on the LGBT community. Let's listen to someone articulate the hypocrisy that they think people like myself have when it comes to supporting LGBT rights, but also supporting Palestine. So
Mental Kindsobi unterstützt diese Übertragung mit 10.
Digga, danke
Für
dir.
Gras oder was auch immer dir
Ey,
gerade
vielen
am
lieben Dank,
besten
Mann.
dabei hilft, mit Deutschland
Digga,
zu gucken.
das wird direkt reinvestiert in Tabak, Digga. Ich schwöre auf alles. Ich danke dir vom ganzen Herzen, Mann. Ich kann mir jetzt gleich Tabak und Filter kaufen gehen und das wäre ohne deine 10 Euro Support jetzt gerade nicht möglich, wirklich. Ich danke dir vom ganzen Herzen, Mann. Vielen lieben Dank. Du darfst gerne sag mir nochmal, was in Mexiko geiler ist als in Deutschland. Komm, jetzt halte ich das aus. Ey, Mann, ich danke dir wirklich. Vielen lieben Dank, Diggi.
Unlike numerous pro-Israeli publications, but My LGBT Network by David Kilmnick. LGBT Network President David Kilmnick's op-ed, The Abandonment of Israel.
Das ist es einfach. Ja, legit, Digga, wirklich. Das ist wirklich mega geil. So, wirklich danke. Mann, wirklich vielen lieben Dank.
By LGBT groups is hypocritical and cruel. So he writes, for more than 30 years, I have stood on the front lines and been an outspoken leader for LGBT people and families. I have been called every name in the book. My life has been threatened because of me being gay. The police insisted on installing a panic button in my house because of these threats. And this hasn't stopped the organising work that I continue to do to bring safety and peace to the LGBT community. And yet, there's times when I'm at LGBT events where the safety that should be given quickly dissipates because I am Jewish as well. There are unfortunately countless examples, but one that I will never forget is the protest that occurred at the National LGBTQ Task Force Creating Change conference I attended in Chicago in 2016. The protest was organised by pro-Palestinian activists who accused A Wider Bridge, a Jewish LGBTQ organisation, of pinkwashing Israel's treatment of Palestinians, and I'm sure that's what they were doing. As I was getting off the escalator to attend the reception, which was hosted by A Wider Bridge, which featured members of Jerusalem's Open House, a gay rights group from Israel, and excited about celebrating my pride as a Jew, I saw a throng of angry protesters disrupting the event. The protesters blocked the entrance to the conference hall and chanted slogans from the river to the sea and took over the stage, preventing the Israelis from speaking. So something I definitely support them doing. I'm glad they did that. I was horrified and fearful, horrified that a disgraceful or authoritarian act like this could happen at an LGBT gathering about creating change for equality and justice, and fearful that if I ever attempted to make my way through that blockade, I'd be physically hurt by members of my own community simply for being a Jew. So I just want to stop the article there quickly. So you see what I'm talking about. He's talking about how much he feels threatened by just these chants about from the river to the sea and how they might even hurt him. Doesn't appear to be a violent protest at all, and how much all of this is just completely self-centered from their own identity. They can't imagine sharing solidarity with just like general Palestinian people, for example, and just general oppressed people. It has to be like a hierarchy of, oh, I'm a gay Jewish man and a Zionist, and that must be protected, and I don't feel safe, so your protest is bad. And LGBT groups simply even accusing Israel of pinkwashing is unacceptable.
Digga.
So he goes on to say, I recall that fear on October 7th, talking about
Wait, wo sind wir denn jetzt hier? Hä? I recall that fear? Wo steht denn das? Das steht hier nicht. Hä?
Hamas and saying how that attack was a call for the LGBT community to
Wait, hä?
Israel of pinkwashing is unacceptable. So he goes on to say, I recall that fear on October 7th, talking about Hamas and saying how that attack was a call for the LGBT community to speak up loudly and boldly in support of Israel. Then goes on to talk about how Hamas is homophobic. And more than 2 weeks later, the silence from many prominent LGBT leaders and groups supporting Israel and condemning
Jetzt hier. And more than 2 weeks later, okay.
the Hamas attacks is deafening. Those that have made brief statements don't even mention Hamas, skirt past the anti-Semitism or lump it in with other intersectional identities as false equivalencies and offer no support to LGBT Jews. It is yet another way to appease other identity groups through silencing LGBT Jewish voices and experiences. To make matters worse, some of these LGBT leaders are protesting Israel and using anti-Semitic tropes that normalize anti-Semitism and alienate LGBT Jews. We have stood shoulder to shoulder with our movement in the fight for racial equality, trans rights, and reproductive justice, and many other issues, and the abandonment of these LGBT groups is both hypocritical and cruel. Israel is a democracy and a beacon of hope.
Ja, imagine, wie könntest du denn gleichzeitig schwul sein und dich gegen den moralischsten Staat aller Zeiten stellen? Könnte ich mir niemals vorstellen, Digga. Crazy. Self-hating gay oder was? Oder wirklich? Was ist das, Digga? Was musst du für eine... Die so-called LGBTQ-Leaders are protesting Israel. Ja, wie können sie das nur wagen, Digga?
LGBT Jews. We have stood shoulder to shoulder with our movement in the fight for racial equality, trans rights, and reproductive justice, and many other issues, and the abandonment of these LGBT groups is both hypocritical and cruel. Israel is a democracy and a beacon of hope and freedom for LGBT people in the Middle East.
Israel is a democracy and the beacon of hope and freedom for LGBT people in the Middle East. Ja, es sei denn, du bist nicht weiß. Dann halt nicht, ne? Komisch aber auch.
A region where many countries criminalize and persecute us, Israel is the only country in the region that recognizes same-sex marriages performed abroad, but
ja, aber halt, ne, nur wenn du halt außerhalb Israels schon geheiratet hast. Wenn du innerhalb Israels heiraten möchtest, dann geht das nicht. Wenn du eine gleichgeschlechtliche Ehe anstrebst.
doesn't allow same-sex marriage in Israel, allows same-sex couples to adopt children, and protects LGBT people from discrimination, and allows us to serve openly in the military. That is such a good...
Krass, Digga, guck mal, sogar gay people dürfen auch Kinder erschießen, das ist ja nett.
thing, isn't it? It allows LGBT people to do genocide in the military. Israel also has its vibrant
Slay Queen!
and diverse LGBT culture, with Tel Aviv being one of the most gay-friendly cities in the world, but it's funny how he doesn't actually mention the other cities in Israel where they are very, very anti-gay. And going on to do genocide propaganda, the LGBT community should not be deceived by Hamas's propaganda. They don't care about Palestine. They only care about their own power and ideology. They use Palestinians as human shields and pawns and victims in their war against Israel, and they exploit the LGBT community as tools and allies in the campaign against Israel. So a lot of Zionist stuff like this is just projection, because something that we're going to talk about later is Mossad often blackmails gay Palestinians into being informants for
Sowas aber auch.
Israel.
Ich dachte, Israel ist ein Beacon for Freedom and Hope for the LGBT people in Middle East. Wie der Mossad blackmailt schwule Palästinenser. Komisch. Crazy, wie das passieren kann. Ich dachte, die wären Beacon of Hope and Freedom. Ha.
So yeah, that's just a good insight into where a lot of these progressive national socialist Zionists come from, in that, oh, we're so progressive. We are so progressive that means if you're not as progressive as us, you deserve a genocide. You deserve to be absolutely destroyed by the Israeli military, because it's openly gay and trans people in the military doing it to Palestinians who might be oh so backwards and more conservative on this stuff. That's our ideology. I told you, it's woke fascism. It's justifying fascism through the language of liberal progressivism. But let's get into what I was talking about as well. So he says that Hamas exploit the Western LGBT community because what? A lot of them are leftists and decent people, But Israel actually do this. So Israel
Huh.
surveils and blackmails gay Palestinians to make them informants, by Philip Weiss in Mondelweiss.
Interessant.
So Israel has sold itself internationally as a gay mecca, and this freedom is regularly cited by advocates for Israel in the West. This is written in 2014, by the way, making stark comparisons to Muslim societies that repress gays. Well, here's a new spin on the claim. Reports that Israeli intelligence pried into Palestinians' phones and internet activity to identify and blackmail Palestinian gay people and turn them into informants. Haaretz has a story on 43 reservists in Israeli intelligence who are refusing to serve because of the political persecution of Palestinians. The reservists write that while surveillance of Israeli citizens is limited, Palestinians are not afforded this protection.
Komisch. Wieso gibt's denn da zwei verschiedene Rechte für die verschiedenen Gruppen im Land? Oh. Oh. Interessant.
They declare in a letter to the Israeli Prime Minister, "We refuse to take part in actions against Palestinians and refuse to continue as serving as tools in deepening the military control over the occupied territories."
Löwen, Digga. Löwen, Löwen, Löwen.
An unsigned piece in The Guardian details testimony from intelligence veterans and exposes practices reminiscent of totalitarian countries. Any Palestinian is exposed to monitoring by Israeli Big Brother. Here are selections where the recovering spooks describe using Palestinian sexual practices to turn them into informants or exploit the Palestinians' need for medical care in Israel. So they
Digga.
say, no boundaries were set for us, both passive activities, such as gathering intelligence, and for active initiatives that had an impact on people's lives. If anyone entrusts us, we'd collect information on their economic situation and mental state. Then we would plan how we can perform an operation around this individual to turn them into a collaborator. Any information that might enable extortion of an individual is considered relevant information. Whether said individual is of a certain sexual orientation, cheating on his wife, or in need of treatment in Israel or the West Bank, they are a target for blackmail. Throughout the duration of my service, no one in my unit ever asked, at least not out loud, if there's anything wrong with this system, whether the transformation of any individual into a target is legitimate, and on the exploitation of gay people and those needing life or death medical care. The period during which I collected information on people who were accused of attacking Israelis or trying to attack them or trying to harm them or thinking of attacking them, in addition to collecting information on innocent people whose only crime that they interested Israeli defense establishment for various reasons they have no way of knowing. If you're gay and know someone who's a wanted person, and we need to know about it, Israel will make your life miserable. Any such case in which you fish out an innocent person from whom information might be squeezed or could be recruited as a collaborator was like striking gold for us and for Israel's intelligence community. We also talked about what is done with information on a target's sexual preference. Here, there would be some deliberation, but the message was that there was no problem with this issue. As an instructor, I said that one should apply one's own judgment and not always pass on such information. So this ties into a broader point that
Cool.
even Israelis who care about gay rights generally, they don't extend that to gay people in Palestine. You see that with the extortion they do on Palestinians through articles like this. I'm sure it's gotten far worse with how much surveillance technology has increased in the last 12 years and how much more territory of Palestine that Israel have taken, obviously extending more of their control on the West Bank, destroying Gaza and taking over parts of Gaza. I'm sure this has gotten so much worse, and I'm sure this is like more common than ever. But I also want to share, and I'll play you a bit of this video. I read this article back in my other video. It was about a lesbian Palestinian who went to Israel because they were, sold this dream that if you are gay and you live in a conservative place that is less tolerant of LGBT rights, come to Israel and you'll be treated fairly. And what she experienced was that they treat her okay as a gay person, but they really didn't like her as a Palestinian person. So listen to me read this article. So Cole, a journal for body and gender research, summer 2015, pinkwashing Israel's international strategy and internal agenda by Gadir Shafi. One of the techniques Israel uses in its pinkwashing campaigns is to fabricate myths about saving Palestinian queers from their homophobic and oppressive families and communities by bringing them to live in Tel Aviv, the ultimate gay haven. Tel Aviv may be a gay heaven for Jewish Israeli citizens or even for the hundreds of visitors who engage in gay tourism. However, it's neither friendly nor a haven for Palestinian LGBTs and queers. As a teenager questioning my sexuality, I felt completely estranged and alone. Conversations about sexuality were non-existent, and even among professionals working within schools. While school counsellors and psychologists addressed controversial issues related to early marriage, domestic and street violence, and the abuse of dogs among teenagers, they refrained from addressing issues related to sexuality, sexual orientation, and gender identity. Even gay literature in Arabic was rare, so I mostly read in Hebrew. Learning about sexual orientation and gender identity in a foreign language was itself alienating. The only means of communication available to me was a support line operated by an Israeli organisation. After much debate, I called the line, and the voice on the other end urged me to move to Tel Aviv. There he assured me I would live my life freely as a lesbian. It was the first time anyone described me as such, even before I was able to define my own sexuality. Despite this disconcerting drawback, the thought of moving to Tel Aviv accompanied me for my last years of school, and shortly after graduating, I applied to study at Tel Aviv University. The move to Tel Aviv was overwhelming. There I thought I would explore my sexuality and live.
Oh no, Digga, oh no. Imagine, du denkst, dass du dann, du bist Palästinenserin und bist lesbisch und denkst so, ja, ey, vielleicht move ich ja einfach mal zu Tel Aviv. So. Da geht's mir bestimmt besser dann. Ja.
Freely, without having to hide, to be closeted, to cease to exist in so many ways. I was introduced to early 90s gay life in Tel Aviv for its vibrant bars and late night gay parties, and made many gay Israeli friends. It didn't take long to realise that they were friendly to me as a lesbian while constantly trying to conceal, even suppress, my Palestinian identity. They affirmed that I did not look and sound Arab, so there was no need for me to embarrass them by bringing up my Palestinianness in
Ja, chillig, ne?
and sound Arab, so
Live freely as a lesbian, ja.
there was no need for me to embarrass them by bringing up my Palestinianness in conversations with others. I protested that my name clearly showed I was Arab. That was when they proposed changing my name for me. I went home feeling disgusted at the thought of being renamed by colonial oppressors to better fit their definition of the lesbian category of identity and not offend their racial sensibilities. I had been a Palestinian Arab my entire life who simply happened to question her sexuality. I had come to Tel Aviv to be who I was, but it became clear to me I was welcome there as a lesbian, not a Palestinian. In their world of alleged freedoms and rights, there was no place for my Palestinianness. I had to choose between being gay and being Palestinian, but giving up a part of myself was impossible to bear. I had never experienced such rejection, and the thought of its exclusion made me sick of the Israeli LGBT scene. At the end of my first year
Ja, zu Recht, Alter, zu Recht.
of university, I packed all my stuff, left Tel Aviv without saying my farewells, determined never to go back.
Imagine, du sagst so, ey, yo, wir tolerieren dich hier, so, du bist ja lesbisch, wir tolerieren dich so, aber du bist halt Palästinenserin, das können wir halt nicht tolerieren, so, ne? Wie wär's, wenn du deinen Namen änderst, Bruder? Beacon of Hope and Democracy and Civilization in the Middle East, weißt du? So.
And just like I was saying with how stuff has gotten worse since 2014, I'm sure this is even worse today. Like, not saying Palestinians were ever treated well and aren't treated well in Israeli occupied territory itself, where Palestinians don't even govern, but at the same time, Israel has just become an absolutely fanatical fascist state across the entire population now. Obviously, it always was a fascist state, but you can see in their support for the genocide, they've gone rabid for this violence. So I'd say that would be even worse today, but I think it's very telling, even in the 1990s, where gay rights were less accepted in Israel, they would still be like, you know, we accept you as a gay person, but not a Palestinian. And that also plays into the reality that maybe Israel isn't a gay Mecca. Maybe it isn't the most progressive place ever. And I found this article from 2022 by something called the Frederick.
Vielleicht, nur vielleicht, ist Israel halt ein kolonialer Apartheidsstaat, ne? Nur vielleicht. Der auf der Vertreibung der Palästinenser aufgebaut ist. So, vielleicht, nur vielleicht.
Naumann Foundation.
Und dann mir ist es auch scheißegal, ob in diesem Genozid ausübenden, so kolonialen Apartheidsstaat, ob da schwule Israelis ein schönes Leben leben oder nicht. Digga, solange da Apartheid herrscht, ist mir das scheißegal, was da für Rechte für Gay People gibt, oder wirklich, juckt mich ein Scheißdreck. Wie kannst du dich denn so selektiv um etwas jucken? Wie kannst du sagen, ja, schwule Menschen sind mir wichtig, aber nicht Palästinenser? Wie kannst du so ein ekelhafter Bastard sein, wirklich?
I'd never heard of this person. Apparently it's like a guy who was like the president of West Germany.
Ja, wirklich, Digga, wenn Leute sowas sagen wie, ja, Israel ist schon nicht cool und so, aber wenigstens kannst du da schwul sein. Bruder, du kannst da nur schwul sein, wenn du Israeli bist, wenn du weiß bist. So, du... Boah, ist das dumm, Alter, wirklich.
Germany, and it's associated with like centre-right liberal political party in Germany, which is like very, very minor and obscure. I'd never heard of it before. But this article was interesting from Richard Wagenlander, and he just talks about the reality of being gay in Israel for even Israelis. Talks about Tel Aviv being like the most LGBT friendly city in Israel, but it also talks about the general landscape of this and how this is like the best example and not reflective of wider Israeli society. Obviously, Israel doesn't recognize same-sex marriage anyway, but a very big contrast to Tel Aviv can be found in Jerusalem, where LGBT plus life is nowhere near as visible or accepted. All of our interviewees emphasize that Jerusalem as a place of special religious importance and a crucial focus point in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is characterized by significantly higher tensions and intolerance towards LGBT plus people. I think they're mainly talking about Western Jerusalem here. So Michael Ross, who founded and runs the English language LGBT plus podcast Straight Friendly Global, supported by the Frederick Naumann Foundation, experienced this firsthand at Jerusalem Pride in 2015, where 6 parade members were stabbed by an ultra-Orthodox Jew called Yishai Schlitzel. One of the victims was a 16-year-old, Shira Banki, who died 3 days later. Even though he was shot by the events, Michael knows of many others who've been attacked or abused by the right-wing radicals. He also notes that the issue of conversion therapy is very common in Jerusalem, but also many other parts of Israel. Conversion therapy is quite common here, and quite a number of teenagers and adults from the US and Canada visit.
Die Domain von der Stiftung ist einfach freiheit.org. Bruder. Was?
Israel each year for these summer camps that are conversion therapy. This could increase if these practices are banned in many countries. So Shay Brampson, chairperson of Havruta, an organization representing religious LGBT plus Jews, which has also sought to ban conversion therapy in Israel, which he suffered himself at 16 years old, he explains that even though they managed to get the Ministry of Health to issue a warning to the public in 2014 regarding these harmful effects of conversion therapy, the subsequent health minister, Yaakov Litzman, ignored all these complaints and reports filed by the group. Stav Ben Barak, who works for LGBT plus organization Jerusalem Open House, notes for difficult interactions with police. Although there's been progress in recent decades, police protection at the Pride Parade has increased since the murders in 2015. There are still officers who do not take reports of hate crimes and discrimination seriously or fail to intervene when LGBT plus people are faced with insults and hostilities. Such hostilities occur frequently, with Jerusalem Open House members recently subjected to verbal abuse by a group of teenagers on their way to an event in Tel Aviv. In addition to the verbal abuse, the youngsters also threw rocks and began physically assaulting some of them until soldiers passing by dispersed the group. Stav notes, that day was a massive blackout for all of those affected, and we were in pure shock at the events. As this instance also shows, it would be wrong to say that such actions are only committed by members of the ultra-Orthodox or religious communities. In Jerusalem, we face similar actions from across different sections of society, irrespective of their ethnicity or religious background or age. There's a general negative attitude towards LGBT plus people here, sometimes even from random teenagers. Further notes that the numerous times that Jerusalem's open house mailbox and signs were vandalized, and how LGBT plus people sometimes avoid certain districts or areas which are known to be very intolerant. And also to tie back to something I was talking about earlier, Ruth Nagar, a well-known LGBT plus activist and feminist in Tel Aviv, points out that even LGBT plus Palestinians from the Palestinian territories that are allowed to enter Israel to avoid persecution don't enjoy a life of bliss. This is because the Israeli state does not recognize these Palestinians as asylum seekers, but provides them with temporary residence permits, which may or may not be renewed every 6 months. These permits specifically do not allow them to take up work or access healthcare or social services, and this often leads to these Palestinians seeing no other option than to enter prostitution or work illegally,
Chillig.
without any social security and the additional uncertainty of their residency status. It also says that the trans community in Tel Aviv are exposed to significantly higher potential for violence and are far more often victims of hate crimes and hostilities. She notes that the main issues in the male-dominated LGBT plus community in Israel seem to be marriage equality, opening up adoption and surrogacy. However, for transgender people, many do not have the luxury to think about these things, as they struggle with even finding a job, accessing adequate healthcare, and getting to work or a supermarket without suffering abuse and violence.
Ja. Also ich als Transperson würde in Palästina, wenn es dort Dächer gäbe, vom Dach geworfen werden. Aber immerhin kann ich ja nach Israel gehen, weil dort kann ich als Transperson wenigstens so ein gutes Leben leben, füllt mit Probleme, einen Job zu finden, Probleme damit, Healthcare zu finden oder Probleme damit, zur Arbeit oder überhaupt zu einem Supermarkt zu kommen, ohne abused zu werden. Geil, ne? Das ist der Shining Beacon of Hope and Democracy oder so for the LGBTQ people. Just saying. Ja, cool.
A job,
Digga.
accessing adequate healthcare, and getting to work or a supermarket without suffering abuse and violence. So I think it was important to read that article to just dispel the propaganda and dispel the myth that
Ja, rede mal, Digga, sehr wichtig.
Israel is some sort of LGBT utopia just because it is better in terms of legally, at least, the attitudes towards the LGBT community than other nations in the region or other countries that are more religiously conservative. But at the same time, the way they paint it like it's the most progressive, LGBT-friendly place ever. It's not even comparable in any way to like Western Europe, the UK, Ireland, France, Germany. It's not comparable at all because these countries don't have extreme religious communities that dominate politics and even often dominate the military, and they don't have a rabidly violent society where most people are armed with guns. People have done some terrible crimes against humanity, and you're expecting these people to all be tolerant and rational. It's just so different. Where you might have some enclaves like in Tel Aviv, for example, it's not reflective of wider Israeli society, and even they say there, Israeli.
Und selbst wenn, Digga, selbst wenn Israel ein Shining Beacon of Civilization und Democracy und Freedom for the LGBTQ people wäre, was es ja offensichtlich nicht ist, aber selbst wenn Israel der sicherste Ort für Gay People auf der ganzen Welt wäre und es da legit keinen Unterschied zu Straight People gäbe und so weiter, ne? Selbst dann rechtfertigt das keinen Genozid. So, keine Ahnung, wer das jetzt hören musste, aber, ne? Queer-Rechte rechtfertigen kein Genozid. So.
LGBT
Just so you all know.
community is very male focused, and even if you're transgender in Israel, you're going to find it very hard. And of course, often these LGBT groups are very Zionist. They hate Palestinians who fled to Israel because they are in the LGBT community and fleeing like persecution or being shunned by their family, because Israel does not provide them any way to exist in Israeli society and get healthcare or even get work easily, because they don't give a shit about LGBT people generally. Israel doesn't care about gay people. Israel doesn't care about trans people. It's all propaganda because they're comparatively better than some other countries in the region. So they use that to try and guilt Western liberals and Western leftists into supporting them without ever showing you the actual reality. They show you these massive Pride City events. They show you Tel Aviv Pride. They don't show you the actual reality that this article touched on of children throwing rocks at gay people, vandalizing LGBT offices and stuff like that, and how hard it is to be gay in Israel itself, they don't talk about any of that stuff because it doesn't fit in with the propaganda that, yes, Israel still has loads and loads of religious fanatics and is increasingly becoming more far right in terms of the individuals who live there. And it's not a place you'd probably want to go if you're in the LGBT community. Like, if you're going to attend a Pride event, and even if you're an immoral piece
Also, ich werde sowas von auf das Pride-Event zum Dead Sea gehen, Alter. Jetzt Ausrufezeichen Kofi, dann könnt ihr mir... Ausrufezeichen... Ich krieg das nicht mal hin, das auszusprechen. Warte doch, ich pack das. Ausrufezeichen Kofi, Digga, damit ich auch in der Name der Liebe, hier, diesen Juni, am Toten Meer, Digga, dort gibt's das Pride Land, Digga, largest Pride Festival. Lasst jetzt euer Geld bei mir, damit ich mir ein Ticket dafür kaufen kann, wirklich. Ich bin richtig hyped. Ausrufezeichen Kofi. Mann, ich hab doch schon donated. Ja, ey. Ja, da ging's aber um Tabak. Jetzt geht's um was viel Wichtigeres als meine Nikotinsucht. Jetzt geht's hier um was richtig Wichtiges, nämlich das LGBTQ Pride am Toten Meer, Digga. So. Wenn ihr euch die Frage stellt, warum das tot ist, denkt nicht darüber nach, ob das jemals palästinensisch gewesen ist und ob es danach tot war. War, glaube ich, schon immer tot. Das hat was mit dem Salzgehalt zu tun. Ja. Digga, wirklich gottlose Scheiße, Bruder.
attend a Pride event, and
Ey, Hakushi, mein Löwe, mein Bär, was geht ab? Schön, dass du da bist, Mann.
even if you're an immoral piece of shit, why would you go to Israel, even in terms of like self-preservation? Why wouldn't you go somewhere else? Why wouldn't you go somewhere more gay-friendly in your own country, rather than travel to this country where you might experience like actual violence from like fanatical far-right Israelis and general like extreme religious communities? Like, why would you do that? The propaganda doesn't even reflect reality. It'd be one thing if Israel was like a massive, you know, absolutely amazing place to live if you were gay. Obviously the propaganda would still be bullshit. It'd still
Ja, genau, weil es immer noch dann kein Genozid rechtfertigt, ne?
be woke fascism, but the propaganda is such a distorted view of the actual reality. It's like one city which is okay, and even in that city you're probably gonna have to stay to certain districts. So if anyone ever brings this argument up to you, just send them a video like this, send them the articles I've used, show them that this is a myth. And like I said, even if it wasn't a myth, it's woke fascism. You're justifying settler colonialism, genocide, war, and apartheid because you have more progressive views on LGBT rights. So that is it for the video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments.
Geiles Video, Digga. Thank you so much for this informative and well-made video. I better cancel my tickets for Dead Sea Pride Limau. Ey. Boah. Ja, fick Kolonialstaaten, so, was soll ich euch dazu sagen, Digga? Free Palestine. Fick den westlichen, fick generell Imperialismus, Digga. Wir müssen als Welt, müssen wir den Kapitalismus überwinden, um, ja, keine Ahnung, nicht mehr Staaten zu haben, die im Staatenkonkurrenz so, in Staatenkonkurrenz gegeneinander agieren. Und es dann zwangsläufigerweise, systematischerweise gewollt zu Sachen wie Kriegen, Genoziden und sonst irgendwas kommt, weißt du, like. Das ist es nicht. We don't need that up in this bitch, also organisiert euch. Ja. Ja, Free Palestine, Digga. Wenn euch die Reaktion gefallen hat, lasst ein Like da und jetzt könnt ihr. Ja, ich lasse auch mal, also, ne, die Artikel, die da die benutzt wurden, waren wirklich sehr gut. Wurde jetzt ja aber nicht verlinkt, ja moin. Aber vielleicht kann man, also, wenn jemand nochmal so eine Scheiße labert mit, ja, aber in Israel könntest du ja immerhin schwul sein, ohne vom Dach geworfen zu werden, dann sagt dem, ey, yo, höchstens nur in Tel Aviv und auch nur, wenn ich nicht Palästinenserin bin und auch nur, wenn ich nicht trans bin und dies und das und also, like, es ist halt offensichtlich Pinkwashing, Bullshit und ihr könnt dann dieses Video zeigen, oder die Artikel, die in dem Video vorkommen, um so das Gegenteil zu beweisen, dass es halt, oder dass es halt einfach nur Propaganda-Scheiß ist. Wenn euch diese Reaktion gefallen hat, lasst ein Like da, schreibt einen Kommentar, drückt den Abo-Knopf, bildet meine Glocken und checkt meinen Stream aus, denn ich bin in der Regel jeden Tag live. Kennt ihr auch schon den roten Regelfall? Ich glaube nicht. Der Rote Regelfall ist ein neuer Podcast, der komischerweise auch mit mir stattfindet. So. Also jeden Sonntag um 14 Uhr live bei mir auf dem Twitch-Kanal und jeden Montag kommt er dann überall raus, wo es Podcasts gibt. Und ja, dort ist vorgestern die 7. oder gestern, keine Ahnung, irgendwann die letzten Tage ist die 7. Folge rausgekommen. Und ihr könnt ihr euch anschauen, wenn ihr das noch nicht gemacht habt. Sonst, so, jetzt wünsche ich euch aber einen schönen Tag. Haut rein. Ciao.